Welcome. Hello. Thanks for joining us today. This is the very first of our new flexible learning course on vaccine misinformation. Today, we are going to cover or to go over some broad topics and essential concepts. If you are not familiar with us, we are First Draft. We are a global organization working to empower people with knowledge and tools to build resilience against harmful, false, and misleading information. Just to introduce myself, my name is Marie Bohner. I'm Global Head of Partnerships at First Draft. I am working on collaborations and outreach in the organization, so do not hesitate to get in touch with me after this course. I will be delighted to talk to you about possible collaborations. I'm also French and German, so forgive my English. I hope to be as clear as possible. So here's our agenda for today and the three main things we are going to cover. First of all, different case studies looking at why communities around the world have lost trust in vaccines. Then we are going to look at a research that has been done by our team around vaccine misinformation back in November 2020. And then we are going to look at some trends and tactics some people are using to spread disinformation and misinformation, weaponizing uncertainty. And we all know that we have been through a lot of uncertainty recently for the last year. Vaccine misinformation isn't new. It also has been a global phenomenon long before the pandemic we are all facing now in relation to other epidemics. So let's start by looking at a couple of case studies to help us dive into why different communities have lost trust in vaccines. First Draft team, as well as other organizations, have started to work on vaccines and misinformation even before the pandemic. For example, around the polio vaccine in Pakistan and the controversy that happened around the Dengvaxia vaccine in the Philippines. Two First Draft studies have been done on these two countries and were published in February 2019 on our website. So this is the first case study. It's around polio and Pakistan. It has been worked on by Sarika Bhattacharjee and my colleague Carlotta Dotto. It uses a detailed mining of social media sites such as Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to demonstrate how vaccine misinformation spreads. Pakistan, you might know it, is one of the two countries in the world where polio is still endemic. There has been a lot of big efforts done by international NGOs and Pakistani authorities to vaccinate people, especially children. And that effort was going okay. And then in April 2019, trust in vaccination broke down. In large part, that was due to a series of rumors, some taking the form of misleading videos saying that children were having an adverse reaction to the polio vaccine. People rushed to the loudspeakers of nearby mosques, begging people to stop polio drops to their children. They also suggested people to take their children to hospital immediately as some poisonous material has been added to the vaccine. That is what Muhammad Ali Ashgar, Deputy Police Commissioner, said to CNN. 25,000 children were rushed to the hospitals, overwhelming them. It was chaos. This happened in the northern part of Pakistan near Peshawar. This is interesting to show how trusted community leaders and local leadership really have impact on these messages as well. And that's something to keep in mind when we talk about vaccine and information and misinformation. There is a lot of evidence to back up that these rumors and videos that were shared really did set up the breakdown of public trust in the vaccination campaign. You can see on this chart that before that, like in 2017, 2018, polio cases had started to be contained and then spiked again at the moment these videos were shared. A quote from the study of my colleagues, says following: Though social media cannot account for each and every event that unfolded on April 22, and it does not tell the full story of anti-polio vaccine sentiment in Pakistan, it is a useful tool in understanding the messaging of the rumors that spread and the key demographic likely to reshare these rumors across social networks. Now, we are looking at a similar graph as the last one, showing Google search interest in polio-related keywords. You can see that at the date where the videos are shared, there is a sudden spike in interest and searches. It is interesting to look at Google Trends to understand what kind of information people are looking for at some point in time, to listen to their queries proactively. And we are going to get back to that matter later on. But it would be missing the big picture to think that the breakdown of trust in the polio vaccine was just because of the misleading videos that were shared in April 2019. It is clearly the spark, and we saw that from the graphs. But a key bit of historical context is that in 2011, allegations surfaced about a failed vaccination effort on the part of the CIA. It was claimed to be a vaccination campaign against hepatitis B, but it was actually targeted at getting DNA information about the Bin Laden family. It sounds mad, but it turned out to be true. To put things in perspective, this happens in the same region in Pakistan where this breakdown in confidence happens years later in 2019. What gives misinformation power, what makes it work, is that it often has a kernel of truth. This is why misinformation is often so strongly rooted. So what can we learn from this? People have valid questions and concerns about vaccines that have contributed to vaccine hesitancy. We need to understand that it is not because we would eradicate misinformation about the vaccines that everybody would suddenly be super enthusiastic about them. Narrowing the problem to just misinformation really misses the big picture. Now, here's another case study. It's about the Philippines and the Dengvaxia controversy. This first draft research was done by my colleagues Jacqueline Mason and Rory Smith, although the topic has been covered by other organizations as well. Dengue is a viral infection that had become a real issue, a problem in the Philippines. The vaccine Dengvaxia was registered in the Philippines in December 2015, as you can see. Then some health experts in the Philippines vocalized some hesitations and some concerns about the vaccines. And in April 2016, the government still decided to roll out a school-based vaccination program, a massive one. But then Sanofi, the pharmaceutical company that produced the vaccine, came out with an announcement saying that in rare cases, it might be that children who had not been sick from dengue before, if they take the vaccine, will have a more severe reaction to the infection. Now, instead of doing what many other countries did after this announcement, which was continuing to roll out the vaccine with tighter regulations and stricter labeling, so that people could understand which children to vaccinate and which not, the Philippines pulled the whole program in November 2017. In addition to that, in January 2018, they had a protracted Senate investigation into Dengvaxia, which instead of focusing on the safety of the vaccine, focused on corruption allegations. All of this came together with a number of allegations that the vaccine was causing children to die. These were totally unfounded, but these claims and the matter of corruption were amplified by the media coverage. All these elements created a long-term process of erosion of trust in the vaccine within the country. Now, this is some data from the Vaccine Confidence Index. Prior to all this controversy around Dengvaxia, 93% of respondents strongly agreed that vaccines are important. And that's a very high percentage if you compare it to other countries, for example, in Europe. Following the Dengvaxia controversy, only 32% of respondents agreed that vaccines are important, which means that in only 3 years, vaccine trust plummeted by nearly 60%. In both of these cases, Pakistan and the Philippines, rumors and misleading claims played an important role. In the case of Pakistan, there were historical reasons to mistrust the intentions. And in the Philippines, there was a mix of the government policy aborting the vaccine program completely, the Senate investigation highlighting corruption rather than vaccine efficiency, and the media coverage amplifying rumors and concerns. Those differences are important because they help you understand that in addition to misinformation, there are lots of reasons why people would not trust the vaccines. Now, this is some data from the United States of America, from the KFF COVID-19 Vaccine Monitor. KFF is standing for Kaiser Family Foundation. It is a nonprofit organization focusing on national health issues, as well as the USA role in global health policy. It finds that Republicans and Black adults are among the most vaccine hesitants in the US. Why is that so? What is interesting is that the reasons for vaccine hesitancy in those two groups are quite different. This is a chart that lays out the reasons for vaccine hesitancy. For example, among the group of Republicans, the percentage of people saying that as a major reason for vaccine hesitancy, the risks of COVID are being exaggerated is of 57%. It is the highest percentage for this reason among any other group. For Black Americans, though, this is not the main reason, only 33% here. For Black Americans, the main reasons are because they are worried of possible side effects, but also because they don't trust the government to make the vaccine safe and effective. This could very well be because of historical events in the US that targeted people of color in vaccination programs and testing. Here's some other data about the level of trust among younger and older Hispanic adults in the USA around the vaccines. There are two things that we can get from that chart. One, young Hispanic adults are generally less trusting, and that's something to be noticed. Second, and probably the most important thing, is that trust is increasing dramatically when we are talking about someone's own doctor, as opposed to the state representatives. Now, that is important to know because if you are going to try and fight vaccine misinformation, you want to understand the reasons behind that lack of trust. Try to think about who would be the trusted leaders of communities, and I say communities in the plural on purpose, in your own country. Who is trusted in terms of messaging? That is something to keep in mind when providing information and wanted to reach out to people, but also fighting misinformation. This is a quote by Dr. Heidi Larson of the Vaccine Confidence Project. I saw how much of the communication strategies were very much driven by what the public health community and immunization people thought the public needed to know. But they weren't responding to what people's concerns were, or issues, or questions. This is an ongoing gap, and it's also for the media. What we think people need to know and the assumptions we make about it, and what people are really searching for in terms of information and answers to their questions. If you want to fight misinformation, you need to understand what people's concerns are. And people's concerns are different from one community to the next. This involves granularity in the research and the investigation you are doing and in the way you are framing your answers. It is a case where one size does not fit all. Now let's get to the report Under the Surface, COVID-19 Vaccine Narratives, Misinformation and Data Deficits on Social Media that was published by First Draft in November 2020. This new piece of research has identified key vaccine narratives on social media platforms in English, French, and Spanish, which could erode public trust in a COVID-19 vaccine and vaccines more generally. The research was conducted last summer by the First Draft team amid growing concern that dangerous narratives and conspiracy theories may result in increasing vaccine skepticism. The authors are Dr. Claire Wardle, Rory Smith, and Seb Cabban. In this section, we will talk about a few themes from our research. First Draft created a unique vaccine typology, which they used to categorize social media posts in English, French, and Spanish. The team analyzed 1,200 posts and looked at the different themes of misinformation that they found. Two themes are dominant across the three languages. The first one is political and economic motives, and the second one is safety, efficacy, and necessity. This shouldn't be surprising based on the case studies that we just went through. There are noticeable differences from one language to the next in terms of themes and vaccine misinformation. We are going to talk more about this and in more detail in the next course. But for now, here are the 6 narrative buckets that we found vaccine misinformation was falling into. So we were looking at political and economic motives, safety, efficacy, and necessity, development, provision, and access to vaccines, conspiracy theories, liberty and freedom, and morality and religion. It turns out that while liberty and freedom is a major narrative around vaccines in English-speaking social media, we did not see it at all in Spanish social media conversations. On the other hand, narratives around morality and religion and vaccines were quite large in Spanish-speaking social media. And if we look at the French-speaking conversations, we can see that there is a large amount of conspiracy theories in relation to the vaccines. For different languages, we also have preferences in the use of different platforms. It also very much depends on the countries. One thing that we found was true across the board was that vaccine misinformation is prominent on Instagram and on Facebook pages, much more than on Twitter, for example. Something to think about is also that the efficiency of tools to monitor platforms when using languages other than English is quite variable. So this is also something to think about in terms of results when you are looking at other languages than English. It is interesting to notice that Instagram and Facebook pages are dominant because there is a fair amount of research on misinformation focusing on Twitter, but much less so focusing on Instagram. It could be that is because Instagram is a very visual platform and images are harder to analyze than text content. But there are also a lot of researchers and journalists on Twitter, which might explain why they are focusing more on Twitter than on Instagram. But maybe we should do a study about that as well. Now, we are going to look at the tactics and the trends of misinformation around health and vaccines and how they are weaponizing uncertainty. So, headline laundering. This is what happens when someone recycles negative or ambiguous bit of news, especially where the headline does not tell the whole story. In this example, you can see a screenshot from my colleague Seb Cabban from the Facebook group Open Oregon. So you can see that the comment, that the context and the comment with the article is no need to quarantine if you had both doses of the vaccine. See where this is headed? And then the title of the article is Oregon revises quarantine guideline for vaccinated people. Well, this sparked a number of conspiracy theories in the comments. We can't be sure of the intent of the person who posted this. But for example, one comment in the comments said that this was just a way to get everyone to take the vaccine, which can be very misleading. There are also a lot of conspiracy theories when it comes to vaccine misinformation, and they can vary a lot. But one thing they often feed off is deep mistrust in politicians and institutions. We can list a few of them, but for example, there are a lot revolving around Bill Gates. Bill Gates trying to control the world, the idea that the same Bill Gates wants to activate microchips in your body to control you, or that the rich want to kill or to control the poor through vaccination. The figure of Bill Gates comes up very regularly in conspiracy theories. It is almost as if using his figure would add some credibility to the various theories because it's a figure that everyone can recognize. Lots of conspiracy theories also play with the idea of control, elites wanting to control the population. Another very big tactic we see around vaccine misinformation and around misinformation in general is that it's overwhelmingly driven by videos and photos. Why is that? Why images, videos have a strong power in terms of emotions. It's fueling emotions, and it's also, as we said before, much more difficult to monitor. We can also imagine that it's also more difficult to counter by long form articles, which might not reach the same audience at all. We can also talk about zombie content. I don't know if that is familiar to you. We use this idea of zombie content for a content that is resurfacing all the time. Here you can see, for example, the theory created by Dr. Andrew Wakefield, published in 1998, and since then debunked several times by scientific teams and journalists again and again. And this theory is stating that the MMR vaccine would be the cause of autism. This theory resurfaces again and again each time there is a public debate around vaccines. Dr. Andrew Wakefield continues to sell books and t-shirts around this theory. And although fact-checking is very important, it does not always prevent these contents from reappearing over and over again. It can even sometimes contribute to amplifying them by talking about them. This is also something to keep in mind when covering misinformation. Now we are slowly coming to the end of this session. Next time, we are going to dive into misinformation narratives and talk about data deficits. So how to help answer people's questions about vaccine even before they ask them. That's something we will explore in more detail in the next session. If we look at data deficits, it's actually content with lack of reliable coverage, even if we, as information providers, could foresee that these contents might trigger questions or concerns among the public. So that's something we could work and be more proactive in advance to slow down the spread of misinformation.